Hello, this is Electra Porzel, and I'm the director of the Language of Consciousness Institute. And one of my wonderful jobs that I assigned myself was to lead a group discussion about some old stories and some new stories that are rising that Charles Eisenstein proposed probably in his books, and in summary, he proposed it in a January blog on Substack. So anyway, the one that we discussed tonight is the old story is only what can be weighed, counted, or measured is real. Now, I remember this from my childhood. My dad was a nuclear physicist, and he would like to have discussions at the family dinner table. The only problem is that your evidence, you had to have evidence that was rational. So even if, let's say, I'm an intuitive and I have a sense of things, and I can talk about things now as an adult from that perspective. Okay, I may not have the physical evidence, but I have other evidence that shows X, Y, or Z, right? But as a kid, I was trained, I realized I could not argue. So I never liked getting in arguments, because from the training with Dad was that if you couldn't present it in a rational way and it wasn't physical or could be counted, then it wasn't an argument. Now, what I think fascinating my dad was that he was also writing a book called Unidynamics at the same time, which proposed to prove through science, through physics formulas, that all things in the world are interconnected. So whether it was religion and biology, psychology, chemistry, astronomy, astrology, all of that was interconnected. So I had a dad who could think beyond the rational and the already believed to a larger concept. But at the same time, when he was teaching us arguing, or how to support an argument, he was teaching us the rational method. And on this call tonight, we really did talk about how that still dominates in most professions. If I have friends in social work, I have friends in psychology, and who feel sometimes that they are drowned by what is measurable, that they don't really get to do the work with their clients, the qualitative work with their clients, because of the amount of paperwork they have to do. So how do you, I think the argument going now is what they've said before, certainly over the last 20, 30 years, is that the more we can measure it, the more that we can put it into a concrete form, the more it is provable to the rest of the world. And of course, the viewpoint of the rest of the world already was, if you look at people who are in helping professions or professions having to do with body work, that kind of thing, they were not held very high. In other words, well, it's nice that you do that, but it isn't valuable. It's not a business thing, right? And I think that the move within the psychology and social work fields to make it more measurable and to put numbers behind things was an attempt to prove their value. But it escaped this, it pulled us away from the qualitative work with our clients. The certainly in the body work field, we call it the soma field, not very held high in the esteem of the real world. We can call it the reality of separation, the businesses that prospered then. And it hasn't come around, but it's better. So we're moving towards this new story, which says reality has a qualitative dimension that will always elude reduction to quantity. So in other words, it's more important that we pay attention to the way we know another, how we help people to open up to the more of who they are. How do you measure that difference in when someone's whole sense of who they are as a body, or who they are as an energetic field, or who they are as whatever their age they are, shifts to something that is more life enhancing and more life generating. it's impossible to measure that. And until we say to people who want to measure everything and take it down to, well, where did they measure on this test, on this trait? Okay, that's not what matters. What this person is now functioning in a way that they find more life affirming, life enhancing. This teen or this young adult has found feels like they have solid ground under their feet in a way that they didn't have before. This older adult is starting a new life, new passions, new interests, and has a richer life. How do you measure a richer life? I mean, certainly our Surgeon General has measured loneliness now as a very, that does have quantitative measures. People are dying from being lonely too much. People are depressed from being lonely. And I have to applaud him for coming on to state that. But that's part of what the problem is here, is that we have been taught in the Western culture to reduce everything to its simplest form. And guess what? That doesn't work. The more complex we recognize, the more complexity we recognize, the greater our chance to be open up to the diversity and dimension of all the things that exist in this earth and on this world. There is so much that we don't see. I think we don't realize how much of our perception of the world is limited by what we've been told to perceive. And if we step back and are able to view the world differently, view our life differently, be with others in the field, we suddenly have options that we didn't have before. We absolutely have to move to this new story. So you're talking about a qualitative dimension. Who's to say that your life's worth living more than it was before you started this journey you're on? I'm 76, and I'm going like, well, great painters have started painting at this time. Other people have begun projects at this time in their lives. One time I was reading a story about these two Black sisters, and they started yoga in their 60s. And then they were there in their 90s, twisting their legs around their head and stuff. And I thought, wow, we're not limited. We're not limited. And we can always start a new way of being or a new perspective of being. And if you look at the ideas about how we are as human beings, we take different roles in different parts of our lives. And as we age, when our children are grown, when they're at an age where they're taking care of a lot of themselves, we have an opportunity to explore new ways of being, but that is qualitative. That is not quantity. I could say, oh, gee whiz, I belong to these book groups, and I have, I could put it in a quantity, but it won't tell you how I'm growing as a human being, how I'm more valuable to my grandchildren, how I'm a more interesting person, how I'm a happier person. Those are all the measures, the qualitative measures of the new story. And most of us need to move there. Yes, there's things that you can measure quantitatively, which is how many widgets did the factory put out. But to try and put quantitative measures on everything and make it the measure of whether something is worth having in this world is an old story that needs to end. Because what we're looking at is a society that needs to treasure itself. We each need to treasure ourselves as being valuable to the world and being valuable with others. We all need to be in friendships and with others in a way that supports us, and we're not alone, and that we get to be our true and best self. And if we do that now, all the adults, then the kids are raised in that atmosphere, and we begin to value their unique and essential self. And when you're valued like that from the time you're a little one, a little kid, it isn't so hard in adulthood to value your unique and essential self, and to know that we each come into the world with unique gifts that are essential to how humanity is to function. There's a term we use for the original, about humans, and there's something called the original design. In other words, the original design about how humans were supposed to be on this earth got abrogated tens of thousands of years ago. And we've been living in this abrogated state, not able to truly comprehend all that we as a human, we as a species are capable of. And we have succumbed, or subsumed, whatever the word is, to this quantitative weighted measure. And what we know is that just because it works to how you put a car together doesn't work how you put a life together. So another great discussion. I could continue for a long time. Think about it yourself. The reason I talk about this is I want you to think about them. The way you and I are going to grow into another way of being is by thinking through these with others and looking at all the possibilities that exist there and actually trying some of them out to see what might life be different if I lived this instead of it the old way. So if you're interested in participating in the discussions that I'm leading, then go to our website, loc-institute.com, go to the events page, and you can register for May. And otherwise, take these stories and sit down with good friends who are open to discussion and like to play with the facets of things and say, what would it be like if the majority of people on Earth moved from the story of reality has a qualitative dimension that will always elude reduction to quantity? Good discussion, meaty discussion. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.